bit of a Transformers fan. I mean, I never went out and bought action figures well into my adulthood or spent days in forums arguing why Michael Bay's Transformers movies suck balls, but I know the basics. I was pleasantly surprised when I played High Moon's Warfare Cybertron just like everybody else was, but it really wasn't that great a game. It was a satisfactorily functional third-person shooter with some serious pacing issues, a story that was all over the place, and dull, mostly unimpressive visuals. So now they re-released the game in hopes they'd get some more money off of you and... Wait, what? What's that? That's a new game? A sequel, you say? Well... fuck? The recently released Fall of Cybertron makes me very sad. It's once again a fairly functional third-person shooter that utilizes the Transformers license quite well. Alright, it's an improved game over the original, but it's just not improved enough. You no longer get to choose your Transformer at the beginning of each level, but it's a small loss considering how they changed the game. The shooting mechanics feel roughly the same, though just a tad more accurate. There's a lot less of a need to look around for ammo or health constantly, even though I still don't get the movie-based system where the alien robots use bullets and conventional rockets to kill each other. Did this even work in space? There is a completely superfluous upgrade system via Teletron 1 shops for extra health and weapons, but it's so poorly integrated it feels merely like a pretense that the game is somehow deeper now. Gameplay is based around cover-based shooting more than in the first game, with the option to switch your weapon from left hand to right and vice versa, and once again you carry one conventional weapon and one BFG for heavy lifting. Of course, there isn't any actual heavy lifting in the game that can't be done by your standard firearm, but whatever, who needs balance when you have robots, right? That's where I start having problems with the game. Some of the feedback has obviously been taken into account. The shooting is more accurate, the game has better pacing, and thank Prime is a lot less platforming or scripted driving sections, even if that does kind of murder the idea of an alt mode in the first place. The levels are a lot more interesting, there is an effort to add some gameplay variety with stealth sections, even if they fall flat on their ass, because no action game in the history of gaming has ever implemented stealth mechanics well unless it was built around them, and while the robots look bulky as ever, which stands as a firm reminder that Japanese should be the only people on the face of the planet allowed to design robots ever, at the very least most of the levels aren't covered in the same metallic textures that mesh with the enemies as many missions take place off-world. But the core gameplay is just tedious. Most of the shooting involves standing behind whatever cover is most convenient and exchanging bullets until the incoming waves of enemies cease. Rinse and repeat until the area is clear and you move on to the next one to do the exact same thing. The special enemy types have been reduced and the ones that remain are very easy to beat. But the insult is that when you actually do need to deviate from the core gameplay, the camera, the slow movement, and the controls make strafing impossible. While the game is mostly easy, large-scale combats are a complete clusterfuck of epic proportions. Even the brief instances when the game shut the fuck up are just to connect loud shooting segments, and it's not unusual to run into the battlefield and end up in your last checkpoint without ever realizing what the fuck just happened. Listen, developers everywhere, I realize that you need to build your game around a specific mechanic, cover-based shooting in this case, but you have to stop restricting the player's freedom within that game. You're supposed to offer the tools with which the player will have fun. Instead, in the last several years, the de facto design logic is to build a path that the player has to stick on, because veering off of it means an instant game over. This is not good game design. For fuck's sakes, your characters have two modes and you leave freedom for fun in neither. You have stealth sections in the game, in a franchise with the tagline "Robots in Disguise," and you never utilize that aspect. Instead, you have half-assed cloaking modes and vents to go around enemies, like some deformed retarded brother of Metal Gear Solid. Hey, High Moon Studios, would you like an original thought? Email me! The much publicized big bots are hit or miss. Down about Grimlock works well enough, and his is the only part in the game that's genuine cathartic violence, as giant robots should always be, but Bruticus plays like ass. He's slow and has 3 attacks that you spam while mindlessly tilting the left analog stick up to keep walking. Visuals are fine despite the fugly bulky robots that shouldn't be able to move let alone engage in choreographed fights, but the sound leaves a lot to be desired. The voice cast is great through and through, and it's in my opinion the strongest thing about this entire game. However, there are no memorable sounds, not transformation sound, which I will not stop bitching about until Hasbro realizes how important this is, and the lowest point is the music, which is a mix of Inception, yes, fucking Inception, and the theme from the Transformers Prime cartoon with action music cues that I couldn't remember if my life depended on it. As for the story, here's the thing. It's really not that complicated. It's a few days before Autobots and Decepticons leave Cybertron for Earth through a space bridge, and both sides engage in missions to prepare for their departure through one channel or another. This is all well and fine, and I genuinely don't need anything more complicated for my Transformers. But I have this weird thing that I generally want stories to have an ending, and this one does not. Unless I accidentally skipped a cutscene, you have your big last fight and then it cuts to black, with an announcement, "Just wait to play the same fucking game in the next sequel to see what happens," implied. No, and fuck off. It's not much to ask that your first grade level cartoon story has a fucking resolution instead of the laziest of lazy cliffhangers. If you're that worried about it, at least the story has some cute nods to the original Transformers that fans may enjoy. They may, but they shouldn't. because almost all of them are from the 1986 animated movie. Whatever, when you start referencing something more obscure from the cartoons or the comics, we'll talk again. Actually, you know what? I have a problem with this. Every translator or writer that has ever existed falls back on that fucking movie for references, and it's honestly getting kind of condescending. I mean, fucking hell, the first game in this same series pulled all its references from that movie, and in this one we have entire scenes playing out, and I'm supposed to think that this is cute and be happy because you think of the fans. I genuinely don't give a fuck about random references to past Transformers media, but you don't reference a 25-year-old obscure animated movie for anybody but longtime fans. Longtime fans who have seen the exact same fucking references in everything carrying the label since, and are sick and tired of them. It feels like mocking, and it's exacerbated by the tiny inconsistencies around the game that a fan would actually notice. There are 5 Dinobots, not 4. You missed Sludge, who ironically has the only scene from that movie that should be in the game but isn't. There is no Dinobot Slug, there is a Dinobot Slag. If you couldn't use the name for some odd legal reason, change the spelling, not the whole fucking name. They're alien robots, they don't need their names to be found in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Also, the term frack is a swear word in Battlestar Galactica. The word for fuck in the Transformers universe is frag. How do you mix those up and nobody notices it? At least you got the spelling for Teletron right. I had tons of criticism to dish out, but don't think that this is a bad game. It's okay. It's just a derivative of every action game in the last few years in gameplay, visuals, and sound, and while it's competent, it's just not that great a shooter. The only thing it has is the Transformers license, which is the only reason anybody ever remembers these two titles ever existed, and despite my mini rant, fans should be generally okay with what the game has to offer. It's a better game than War for Cybertron despite the bullshit. But if High Moon Studios expected to make a fan out of new players of either the license or just their games, it won't happen. Unless you already know the Transformers, the game gives you no reason to either be invested in them or even just like them, and I'm sorry High Moon, but there are much better shooters out there, and nobody would have looked at this unimpressive love of overused ideas and design philosophies if not for the impact this name carries in pop and nerd culture of today. Everybody who liked the first game, you like this one, but you won't be missing out on anything if you pass. The rest just steer clear, because $60 for this thing is just a reminder that in the end of the day, this is still an Activision game.